OSU's football domestic violence investigation and the 12th District nail-biter. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News. Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch. Dale Butland, Democratic strategist, and Bob Clegg, Republican strategist. Urban Meyer is one of the nation's best and highest paid college football coaches, seemingly untouchable at Ohio State. But his position at OSU and his career are in jeopardy because of how he handled allegations of domestic abuse. The charges center on former receivers coach and ace recruiter Zach Smith, who stands accused of abusing his wife in incidents that stretch back to 2009 when he worked for Meyer in Florida. Meyer fired Smith last month after a recent incident, but now Smith's ex-wife suggests Meyer knew about another incident a few years ago.
In 2015, I came forward with it. I told Shelly. I sent her some pictures. I spoke to her on the phone. You know, Shelly she said she was going to have to tell Urban. She was going to have to tell Urban. I said, that's fine. You know, you should tell Urban. We can't have somebody like this coaching young men.
The interview and text messages cast doubt on what Meyer told reporters immediately after firing Zach Smith.
I can't say it happened because I wasn't there. I was never told about anything. Never anything came to light. I never had a conversation about it, so I know nothing about it.
OSU has put Meyer on paid leave, and the university is investigating how he handled these allegations. Laura Bischoff, this comes down to two basic questions. Did the coach know? And if he knew, did he have an obligation to report it?
We don't know what he knew. That's the big question, or when he knew it. But he does, under his contract, have an obligation to report it. There was a provision added to his most recent amendment to the contract that requires him to give written notice if he has any knowledge of allegations of Title IX violations, the federal law, and/or university policies.
But this is his new contract. Does that apply to old allegations that happened before he signed this contract? Might a lawyer argue that? I'm guessing they would.
I'm sure that there's a lawyer could probably poke holes in all sorts of elements to this. I think that it's going to be interesting to see what Ohio State, how it moves forward with this investigation, and whether or not they have cause to dismiss him. If they dismiss him without cause, his contract, his new amended contract, calls for a $38 million check to him.
It's a lot of money.
Right.
So do we believe that he didn't know? If his wife knew, according to this woman in the text messages?
I think this is the tough part of this, is we're now getting to a point where we're going to investigate what a wife may or may not have said to a husband. And, that gets into very gray areas.
Make it even grayer. She's a university employee.
Yeah, and what I think we need to look at is was Urban Meyer, when he was originally hired, and then with the re-up of his contract, was he given any specific guidelines on the kinds of individuals he may or may not hire? I doubt it. Now, you could say that maybe he should have known better, that you shouldn't be bringing somebody on staff that has marital issues that go to that degree. But, I mean, I think we're going to have to get to that point at some time here where universities are going to probably have to delineate pretty expressively what they may or may not do hiring-wise.
So the problem is this. What we all know is that Coach Smith was Earl Bruce's grandson. We all know that Urban Meyer felt as though Earl Bruce was a second father to him. Hired him down in Florida. Here's what we know for sure. The Meyers, both Shelly and Urban, knew of Mr. Smith's problems with his wife down in Florida. In fact, he was
charged and charges were dropped.
He was arrested and charged with aggravated domestic violence. So they certainly knew that happened. We also know that they viewed Coach Smith as more or less a member of their family. We also know now that in 2015, the wife of Coach Smith texted Shelly Meyer, told her of the abuse. In my judgment, it strange credulity to believe that Urban Meyer's wife did not tell him, particularly when it was about somebody with whom they had had a very close relationship in the past and they had gone through this with in 2009. And that's the problem for Ohio State now, I think.
And Kathy, it comes down to, now in 2015, there were no charges filed.
There were no charges filed. There
According
were
to the record,
complaints
he
made.
didn't commit a crime.
Right. He wasn't charged with a crime.
Yeah, so
It really comes down to whether or not he knew. And the other thing to kind of add on to what Dale said is there were other coaches' wives that were also aware of the issue. So it's hard to imagine that the coaching staff was not aware of what was going on. It's just really hard to imagine. But that said, they're going to have to show that he knew.
Except from a public relations point of view, this has gotten national legs now. This is a national story. This week it was one of the top stories on the national news. If Ohio State puts him back on the sideline and basically winks at this, the problem you're going to have is there's a whole bunch of folks out there in the country that are going to say, Ohio State always is now what it always has been. They're just a football factory. That's all they care
Well,
about.
that's a
I'm not
PR
sure.
problem, especially given what's going on in some other programs right now. It's
PR
leaving people with the impression that Ohio State doesn't care or turns a blind eye to these
Correct.
issues of assault. And
Laura, you could argue that because of the Me Too movement and the increased intolerance, to use that term, of domestic abuse and abuse of any kind, that the universities are being overly cautious and not willing to fire somebody who should maybe be suspended or give it another chance to make right.
Yeah, however, as Dale said, Zach Smith was charged in 2009, so how many second chances does one get, and how much did the Meyers know and share amongst each other? I think that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it's an honor and a privilege to coach in a Big Ten football program, and there should be no tolerance for domestic violence in those programs or anywhere.
And it's a problem that's not just with college football, but also pro football has had a lot of problems with domestic violence involving their players. And, it's a tough issue, and football in general has got to come to some realization of how to deal with it.
And Urban Meyer has had zero tolerance with players who have been
Right.
accused or found to have abused girlfriends,
Right.
wives, or whatever. So this coach is a tremendous recruiter also, not just a grandson of Earl Bruce and not just the receivers coach. He was named one of the, if not the top recruiter in the Big Ten, if not one of the top recruiters in the country. So
Well, they're
he's
the
more than
face. They're the face of the university when they're going out there to meet not just with prospective players, but also their families, their parents. So you got to make sure that you have somebody that's being the face that is worthy of being the face.
What do we make of this committee? OSU has named a committee, 6 people. There are 3 members of the Board of Trustees, 3, quote, independent folks. Joanne Davidson's on the committee, a couple former prosecutors, familiar names, Alex Shoemate, Alex Fisher. Is this independent enough to conduct a thorough and fair investigation? What's the thinking out there, Kathy?
I guess we'll have to wait and see, but you do question when there's people on the Board of Trustees that are going to, their job is to look out for the best interest of the university.
Yeah.
We'll hope that the investigation is thorough, but until we see it, we won't know.
But I might also add is that President Drake, when he first arrived 4 years ago, he had that band investigation sitting on his desk waiting for him. And he didn't hesitate to fire the band director when he determined that he had turned a blind eye toward a culture of sexual harassment and hazing. And so we'll see how Drake handles this one. It's certainly, I often say that the best damn band in the land is second only to the Buckeyes in terms of beloved levels.
Who was the body that I don't recall the body that
It
investigated.
was the compliance office.
Yeah, that was all internal, but
It was all internal.
Well, and also, let's remember, too, there's more than just Coach Meyer and his staff. There's also the whole athletic department and the athletic director. And, we have to look at what they are doing or not doing. I think we got to look beyond just the actual football staff to the whole general culture in sports at Ohio State.
All right. Let's get to politics. In these dog days of August, Central Ohio finds itself the center of national political attention. Voters Tuesday will decide who will fill out the remainder of Pat Tiberi's congressional term. The special election pits Republican Troy Balderson against Democrat Danny O'Connor. The latest poll shows a dead heat. Balderson has a 1-point lead, well within the margin of error. In June, Balderson had a 10-point lead over Danny O'Connor. Bob Clegg, you're a Republican. You supported Troy Balderson early on.
Yep.
How worried are Republicans about this?
Well,
this race?
it's a special election, obviously. So with special elections, you have turnouts that you just don't know, especially a special. I mean, we had a special in Georgia last year that I think was in February, which is a little different than a special in August. I mean, especially early August, because you have a lot of families who are finishing up their vacations because it's right before school goes back. So it's really difficult to figure out who's going to turn out for something like this. Right now, Democrats obviously have a good margin on the early voting. They are more energized, probably. And number two, they also are able to get their voters out early. Same thing happened in Georgia. The Democrat candidate had a good early vote margin. What tends to happen then is on election day voting, Republicans do much better. The question here is, with this race, is we know O'Connor's going to win Franklin County. By what margin? And then can Balderson, who's going to win the rest of the district, at what margin can he get to offset the margin in Franklin? It's pretty simple.
Donald Trump's coming to town. We're coming to Delaware County, Powell, I guess, Olentangy School District. Is that good news or bad news for Danny O'Connor, Dale?
Well, first of all, it goes back to your first question. The Republicans are plenty worried. If they weren't worried, you don't send the vice president in 1 week and the president himself in this coming Saturday. They've got polls showing this is very close. And it shouldn't be. Let's remember, this district has been held by Republicans for 35 years. They have a registration margin of 2-1 over the Democrats, and Trump won the district 2 years ago by 11 points. If Republicans have to fight this hard to hang on to a district like the 12th, that is very good news for those of us who are hoping the Democrats will take back the House this fall.
This is very much a referendum on the president, and what we're also going to know when we see the results on this next Tuesday is how enthusiastic the Democrats are. I mean, if the Democrats win this race, it'll be astounding.
All signs point to the Dems are really fired up. It's the district favors the Republicans. Yeah. It's been held by Republicans since like 1939, except for one term a Democrat held it. Balderson's got the backing of Trump and Pence and Kasich, which is in itself an odd combination.
What else could bring those two together? Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is a race that is actually, Balderson's race is actually unified. It's the one thing that Kasich and Trump can agree on.
There was an interesting, the Kasich was reluctant to endorse Balderson, but Republicans always come home, right, Bob? They always fall in line. Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. Troy Balderson has tried to support Trump, but also keep his distance from Trump, trying to strike that balance. Now he's full in on Trump. He's going to be on stage with him Saturday night.
Yeah, my guess is what they're seeing in the polling is probably the most reluctant Republican voters are probably hardcore Trump supporters. I mean, we had in the primary a candidate who was backed by Congressman Jim Jordan.
Yeah. Melanie Lenahan, and those tended to be the hardcore Trump supporters. I think a lot of them were still mad. They're still licking their wounds from the primary, and I think they're bringing in the president to try to resolve that. Remember, though, the president won Delaware County in 2016 with only 55% of the vote. I say only 55% because Mitt Romney got 60% of the vote. So in some of these suburban counties, you had Trump supporting, but not at the levels that you maybe had seen in previous presidential elections. And I think Troy Balderson was aware of that, which is why you had, some of that early on for and then maybe not for so much. What is the big issue in this race? Is it Donald Trump, or is it Medicaid, Medicare? Is it taxes? Is it?
I think Kathy's right. It's a referendum on the Trump presidency. But I also think that you hear, like if you watch the ads, they're each trying to portray the other side as bad for seniors. Because Troy Balderson made comments at the Dispatch editorial board that he would consider increasing the eligibility age for Social Security and Medicare. The Balderson camp is firing back at that criticism with ads saying that Danny O'Connor his policies would jack up utility bills.
And Danny O'Connor's trying really hard to talk about being a peacemaker, working with both parties, returning a more civility. Why are you laughing? Returning civility to Congress. I mean, that's kind of been his big message,
Well,
I
he's
think.
he's a Democrat running in a Republican district that doesn't want to say he's ever a Democrat. So, and that's going to be his problem. If by some chance he does get elected, he then has to vote. And this is where the Democrats have always had their problems with electing a Democrat in a Republican-leaning district, is that they then force their members to vote on things that come back to haunt them later on. And
There
I
won't
don't
be
know
that
how
many
you
votes
resolve
between
it.
now and November anyway, probably.
So midterm elections in the first year or the first 2 years after a president's been elected are always referenda on the president, always. That's why the party in the White House has failed to lose seats only twice in the last 150 years. It's always a referendum on the president. That's what's motivating the Democrats, certainly, in that there. In terms of O'Connor, you know, you have to know your district. We saw that with Connor Lamb in Pennsylvania, in the special election. We saw that in Alabama, where the Democrat won down there. But Bob, I don't think it's going to be so hard. You know, for a Democrat to tell people, even Republicans, he'd like to protect their Social Security, doesn't want to see the retirement age raised, I think that's going to have a lot of support, even in a district like that.
All right, we'll find out. Tuesday is the day for the special election just for the 12th district. The candidates for governor continue to build support and raise money before intense campaigning resumes in September. This week, Richard Cordray laid out his plan to fix Ohio's infrastructure, roads, bridges, public transit, broadband. He wants the state to borrow nearly $2 billion to pay for it. Voters would have to approve it, but Cordray promises no tax increase to pay back the loan. Mike DeWine this week picked up the endorsement of 3 Ohio business groups that traditionally support Republicans, and he plans to be with Donald Trump in Delaware County. Dale, first to the infrastructure plan by Democrat Cordray. Is this just another example of tax and spend, or in this case, tax and borrow Democrats?
Well, there's no tax involved.
I mean,
there is no
borrow.
there
Borrow
is no
and
tax money involved. Well, look, given the Trump administration's broken promise to fix our infrastructure, you may remember that's one of the things that Trump ran on was a big infrastructure bill. I haven't seen one. I don't think anybody else has either. And we got a D+. The state of Ohio just got a D+ from the American Society of Civil Engineers, I think they're called. We have crumbling roads, bridges, water, everything in this state. I think this is a reasonable plan, floating a bond issue, doesn't require new taxes. What is the alternative? Mike DeWine says he wants to appoint a blue ribbon commission to study the issue to death. If you elect Richard Cordray, you can get the state moving again, and I think that this is a very good example of that.
A whole lot of specifics in this plan is exactly what would be fixed, but
Well, there's no specifics in anything that's going on in the governor's race. It's, you know,
Keep
kind
hoping.
of high level, glossy ideas.
But it's certainly a plan that voters will get behind. I mean, everybody has, you know, familiarity with bad roads and bridges and such. I mean, it's a popular issue, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not a real, he's not really going out on a limb with this one.
he specifically said public transit, Bob, and I don't know specifically what John Kasich's record is on this. I know he didn't want the
Yeah.
rail early on.
Yep. Well, public transit is, you know, that's something Democrats always push. They're doing it in California, and it's become a, $75 billion boondoggle. So the problem here is it's got to be paid for. Okay, now he says he's not going to raise taxes. Well, then that means something's got to be cut. But like everybody else has said here, this is so broad and so vague, he doesn't go into how exactly he's going to pay this. But if he's not going to raise taxes or additional revenue somehow, then he's going to have to cut. And he's going to have to cut some program that I'm sure there's always a constituency out there when you do cutting. So we'll have to wait and see what he really wants to try to do.
So you don't have to cut if you're going to do a bond issue. But beyond that, may I say
You gotta
something
pay the
about
interest, and the interest
Gotta pay the
could
interest out of
possibly.
something, and you got to balance the
May
budget.
may I say something about what you said earlier about endorsements? I don't know about anybody else at this table, but I was absolutely shocked when I found out that the Ohio Chamber of Commerce and the 2 other major business organizations in the state endorsed Mike DeWine for governor. I mean, who knew that rich guys who run businesses like Republicans? Who knew?
It would have been
Dale, that tells you how much you know about the chamber. Vast majority of members of the Ohio Chamber are small businessmen who are not millionaires. I know you think everybody that runs a company is one, but they aren't.
The Ohio Chamber,
And National Federation
when Ted
of
Strickland was on the
Independent
ballot,
Businessmen.
broke a 100-year tradition of not endorsing a governor's race in order to endorse the
Right?
Republican.
Look what happened
And I hear
to
they are
Ohio
again.
with 10% unemployment and an $8 billion deficit. They were right to do that.
Speaking of endorsements, you know, Mike DeWine has been kind of, again, keeping his distance, sort of a air hug with Donald Trump. But now he's going to be in Delaware County with the president this weekend. Wise to be up there? He's going to have his picture taken with Donald Trump. It'll be in negative ads in the fall.
Sure.
Is it wise for him to do that?
Well, as of today, we have 3.9% unemployment rate. The economy's booming. There are a lot of good things going on in this country. We have more people now saying the country is headed in the right direction than we did during the Obama years. So there's a big upside to also being with the president. I know everybody around here thinks it's all negative, but when it gets right down to it, we have a great economy and there are a lot of people that are happy, and why not take advantage of that?
And that's what the president has been focusing on, among other things. But
Well,
a lot
it's
of
always
focus
been-
on the economy in these rallies in recent days.
For how many election cycles have we talked about economy and jobs being the #1 issue? So why wouldn't you?
The problem is the president doesn't talk about the economy and jobs as much
The
as he
president talks
should.
about everything. I
He
wouldn't
needs
try to
talk-
limit him to
he
one
needs
subject.
to talk more about the economy and jobs. is what I'm
Well,
trying
it
to
is the
say.
best recovery ever in the history of
It
the
is,
United
and-
States,
and
according to the president. So.
We're talking about all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, as somebody said yesterday on MSNBC, this Republican guy was saying to Stephanie Ruhle, he said, when was the last time you saw a quarter of 4% growth? She said 4 times during the Obama administration.
All right, let's get to our last topic. A story by the Associated Press gave many political watchers pause this week. It turns out that John Kasich, a Republican and supporter of the death penalty, has spared a record number of Ohio death row inmates in his 2 terms in office. The governor has signed the death warrants of 15 condemned prisoners, but he commuted the sentences of 7 men, the most of any governor in office during a time when Ohio's death penalty was active. Kathy Kandinsky, is this just another example of how the death penalty is fading? I mean, there was really no controversy when he spared these.
Well, there's not the
sentences.
political liability with the death penalty like there was before. When you commuted a sentence, you might take a lot of heat for it. That's changed. Public opinion has kind of changed on this. But not to the point where I think we're going to see a repeal of the death penalty. Democrats introduce that legislation every session in the State House. It never goes anywhere. Although I do agree with you, public sentiment has changed. I think there's about 135 people on death row in Ohio right now, and I think we're most likely to see the end of the death penalty when nobody's left on death row. You'll note that jurors, especially here in Franklin County, which I'm most familiar with, just aren't handing down death penalty sentences anymore. Fewer and fewer people are getting sent to death row.
They also find that the polls show that if the public knows that life without parole is also a sentencing option, that the support for the death penalty drops down to about a third.
Have opinions changed? You know, I mean, we've seen opinions change, particularly gay marriage. That opinion sort of did a 180 almost. Bob, has there been a similar change with the death penalty?
I think there has been. I think part of it has been the fact that it takes so long when a death penalty sentence is handed down to when it's actually done. And I think that whatever effectiveness it may have had, it's lost in that process. I personally am not for the death penalty. I think life without parole is great. I think, for somebody who doesn't like to spend money, I think spending our money to do that is fine. I mean, that's a good government thing to do. But I think just the implementation of it and the lag in the time is the biggest problem with the death penalty.
There's also, go ahead.
With respect to polls, there's no question it has been changed. In the last poll I saw, there is a bare majority, 51%, supporting the death penalty. Opposition is now in the low to mid 40s. As Laura said, that falls, the number of people supporting it, if you put life in prison with no possibility of parole. The expense is another thing. It's much more costly to execute somebody than it is to keep them in prison forever.
There's all sorts of extra layers of appeals and right to counsel, et cetera. I also think that the erosion of support for the death penalty might also be linked to the fact that we have a lot of DNA exonerations. Nationwide, since 1973, there's been 162 death row exonerations with evidence of innocence.
Nobody wants to condemn the wrong
Let's
person.
get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Bob, you're up first.
Okay, 12th Congressional District, we just talked about it. Media, broadcast, cable, TV, and then radio, we're getting in on $7 million between the candidates and the groups that support them.
Not on public media.
No.
Dale.
The race for Attorney General is shaping up to be the most interesting one of the year, and not just because Dave Yost, the Republican, is up to his eyeballs in the ECOT scandal. It's also because former U.S. Attorney and Democrat Steve Dettelbach is running a crackerjack campaign, as evidenced by the 2 hotly contested endorsements he just got, and that often have gone to Republicans, the building trades and the FOP.
We got to get to Kathy. Go ahead, sorry.
I forgot what I was going to say now. I was listening to I was going to talk about Urban Meyer. I'm sorry. When this first broke yesterday about Urban Meyer, I thought for sure he'd be gone by the end of the week. I'm not really sure. I think he's going to end up staying at Ohio State.
And Laura.
On Thursday, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base had an active shooter that wasn't actually an active shooter. There was chaos and panic, and it was a kind of a major, now there's a major investigation. Check out Dayton Daily News for details, but the silver lining is no one was shot and
Yes,
killed.
it was a training exercise.
That got miscommunicated somehow.
My off-the-record comment, we at WOSU lost a good friend and colleague this week. Tom Lahr passed away. Tom literally kept this TV station on the air for 46 years. He was our chief engineer. He continued to work for us part-time after his retirement. He guided WOSU through many technology changes. He personally helped many viewers with their digital converters going into their attics to fix their antennas. He spent countless middle-of-the-night hours at our transmitter keeping our signals strong. His devotion to WOSU was only surpassed by his devotion to his family. Our deepest sympathies to his wife, Marilyn, and children, Caitlin and Stephen. You are in our prayers here at WOSU. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, Twitter, and our website, WOSU.org. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.